Keep your hands and head inside the vehicle at all times. Buckle your seatbelts, check your mirrors, sit on back and relax. It's lights out and away we go for the Tall and Short of It podcast. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for another Tall and Short of It, coming to you live from Monday. I'm your host, Justin.
And I'm Aaron. Welcome back, everyone. As Justin mentioned, we're recording this on Monday, so a little less of the normal F1 week news and little chit-chat, but we've got plenty to get into today. We'll be talking about LeMans 24-hour a little bit. Of course, the Canada Grand Prix preview for this upcoming weekend, some League of Legends, some other esports. So a full plate ahead of us, Justin. It's good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. Very shortly after the last time, but excited to get into the episode. A little bit of esports stuff as well. But why don't you start us off with your rose, thorn, and seed here?
Sounds good. So my rose for this week was. It was my seed last week, but the wedding that I was at with Colleen up in New York was a blast. I was one of the groomsmen, so it was really cool to be a part of that for my friend and kind of get to go through that day with him and all. It was definitely a bit different from the only other comparison I have, which was being one of my brother's groomsmen. So slightly different vibe and like layout of the day, but it was a really good time. They threw quite the celebration, but yeah, it was a very fun weekend up in New York.
Hell yeah, happy to hear it.
Yeah. So, but my thorn this week, I think with being gone over the weekend, like that kind of took me out of my work mind and everything, but last week was pretty busy and hectic because my boss was out on vacation, and so I was holding down the fort on that end as well as mine. This week started off kind of catching her up, but with some wrenches thrown into my normal daily plan, with some unexpected applications and things for apartments that want to move in like lickety split, gotcha. Which is not the easiest to prepare for or to get done, and I'm having to Jenga or Tetris around some other reservations that I have coming up because of it. So it just kind of threw my day into a tailspin from the start, and I was just feeling anxious and stressed all day. So like it's on a good note. This is the first time I've really felt like a lot of anxiety in quite some time, which is good. But two, it like really hit me hard and had me in a bit of a mood towards the end of my day. I just like, everyone was getting on my nerves. I was just trying to hold it all in, not blow up on someone for what would seemingly be a small reason, but had just been building to that point, and I held that all together. But yeah, by the end of my day, I was just like, I gotta get out of here. Like I'm so fed up. So yeah, that was not really how I wanted to start my week. I'm hoping that a good night's rest and just kind of getting the ball going tomorrow, I'll be able to feel a bit better about all of that, but not how I would have liked to start the week.
Oh yeah, that sounds pretty rough for a Monday, I have to say.
Yeah, it was it was from like being in for 10 minutes, like kind of on for the rest of the day. It just kept going. So but my seed for this week is we have another wedding we're going to for some friends in a couple of weeks. So 2 weekends from now, and I'm very much looking forward to that. And this time being able to take the full Friday off and everything and leave things with my property manager so I don't have to be stressing out, worrying. I ran in for 2 hours on Friday morning, even though I had taken the whole day off, because I just like didn't trust that things were going to be okay without me. And it was kind of the right call. My one employee just looked like a deer in headlights when I was filling, like, kind of going through all the things that were on Friday, Thursday evening. At the end of the day, I was like trying to talk it through, be like, okay, we've got this, and he just looked like, oh my god, what? Like, what's going on? I'm, which I'm just like, where have you been all week? Like, like we've talked about. I had been talking about all these things all week leading up to the weekend because I was like, I'm gonna be out on Friday. The property manager is gonna be. I was trying to have everything an extra day ahead of schedule so that I could just hand it off, and I was like, yeah, that's not gonna happen. So I came in on Friday and all, but I'm looking forward to not having to do that in a couple weeks for the other wedding we're going to.
Nice. Thankfully, it'll all be hopefully taken care of.
I think so, and I'll do the same thing. I'll still try to get everything on my end ahead of schedule, but I won't be trying to help the entire office be a day ahead.
Right.
Like I felt I needed to since no manager was gonna be there. So, but it worked out. But yeah, looking forward to that trip out to Western PA in a couple weeks. But that is my rose, thorn, and seed for this week. Let's hear what you've got going on over there.
Sweet. I'll run through it here. So, I'll start with my seed. I think it was last week or it was recent. We had a, I guess you would say like a quarterly meeting with our accountant, and for the first time in probably since we started going to them, at every point in the conversation, I understood what we were talking about. For a long time, there were all these like, form titles and this and that, and schedule this and schedule that. And I wasn't 100% always. I would have to ask Sarah a couple questions, ask some questions here. But for the most part, I think my understanding of the like kind of back end finance side of it, kind of what we are in the eyes of like the federal government and the state government, is kind of coming more to like understanding more than just like trusting him in like yeah like whatever you say, you know what I mean.
Gotcha.
Where now I actually kind of like get what we're going over and understand kind of like the trajectory of things, so I thought that was pretty cool.
Nice.
And then my thorn here is just maybe similar to what you had going on today with like a little bit of like stress, a little bit of anxiety. I think I've been like stress eating basically, where I'm just like snacking a bunch at like weird hours where like if I find myself without something like really constructive to do, I'll just like let me see what's in the pantry, and like snacking as something to do. So I think there's like some anxiety component to it, but overall I've been trying to be mindful of it happening and then paying attention to how it makes me feel, not trying to, or I'm doing my best not to like come down on myself for it, but just, be aware of it, note how I feel, and then hopefully when you continue to do that, hopefully, I'll be able to make some better decisions moving forward, instead just like reach for a glass of water or like just reach for the pen or whatever.
Yeah.
So
I think, well, I saw something about that recently too, because I think I do that a little bit, like eating to fill my time or boredom or whatever, or just something to do when I'm not doing anything. And what the person was talking about was basically like an easy way to kind of work on that is, like you said, awareness, but the way they described it is thinking of like why I'm eating. Like, am I eating for hunger? Am I eating for enjoyment? Am I eating out of boredom? Like, and if you categorize that and think about that when you're going and getting something, then you can kind of determine more like or recognize a little bit more when you're doing that for out of boredom or just something to fill your time, because you're categorizing it every time you like are going to eat. Oh, I'm going to eat dinner. Why am I eating dinner? Because it's dinner time and I'm hungry. Like, oh, okay, cool. And then move on.
Gotcha.
And oh, it's 11:30 p.m. and I'm going and raiding the pantry. Why am I eating? Probably a little bit of boredom or something to do instead of like going to bed or whatever. That kind of thing. And you can like you can recognize it better by categorizing it, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that actually seems like a very useful strategy. I may have to incorporate that where I can. Because yeah, that's like super useful and like a thing that you can incorporate immediately. I really like things like that that are like actionable, like useful bits of information that you can act on kind of right away. So that's pretty cool. And then my rows here with all my thorns here over the last couple weeks, all the phone calls that I've been alluding to, I finally have health insurance, or at least just like coverage. So where previously I was being caused a whole bunch of stress, now a wave of relief washed over me today when I got the kind of all thumbs up from all the all the beacons that needed to show a thumbs up. They all showed a thumbs up, so I was pretty good and happy about that. So pretty good rose here this week. But yeah, other than that, that is my rose, thorn, and seed.
Awesome. Well, I love to hear it. Getting rid of one of those stressors in life is always good once you can check those off the list. But to get into the meat of the episode today, we've got a few quick hitters, a couple non-motorsport ones to start it off, but just an interesting thing because for years and years with playing League of Legends, I would be on Reddit quite a bit. But today and tomorrow, I think so far about 85% of Reddit, according to this tweet I saw this from a number of places with different numbers, but apparently about 85% of Reddit's community pages and subreddits have gone dark and just gone private for a couple days to protest Reddit's. They're changing the structure of their API, which is their application program interfaces, which basically means any third-party app that's pulling data from Reddit. So if you use any like non-actual Reddit app on your phone or a different way to like scroll Reddit, those pages have to pull all and request all of the data from Reddit to obviously come to their structure and layout and everything.
Whoa.
So Reddit, this used to be free to do. And so there these apps that have been like, I used to use Reddit is fun when I was on an Android. Now I've been using I can't even Apollo on Apple. Those are like the two of the biggest ones, and basically because Reddit added a cost for like every bit of data that you pull from them now that used to be free. It is like if these apps continued to try and host all of the Reddit like information, it would just bankrupt them. Like they're pulling so much data from Reddit that even these like minute amounts, these tiny cents or parts of pennies would just immediately like bankrupt them in like a month because of how overwhelming the cost would be overall because of how many users they have on these like other apps. So yeah, for especially with like most of the moderation teams for all the different subreddits being free, like basically volunteer work on the behalf of those people, they're like what the heck, like now Reddit is going to be just like squeezing out potentially a lot of users and people who would be viewing our content by crushing the apps that they use. So like we're protesting because they don't find it fair that Reddit is trying to like bring in all this profit, capitalizing on like the work that they do and forcing it all through Reddit's own like apps and infrastructure. So
what I guess a bunch of questions come up, but my first thing is, what do the third party apps, like, how do they give value to a user that Reddit doesn't?
So a lot of them have like small additional features that you can add in, or they're just a like so additional features like I'm trying to think of a good example. But I think mostly like the way you can sort things, group things, and like kind of keep the information that you want and organize it so that it's like easy for you, whether that's multi Reddits and things like that, that you're seeing a stream of a number of things together. Like if you want to create like an esports multi Reddit, which I think are things you can do on Reddit's actual page. But if you want an esports one, you can make that multi Reddit, and you can have it show you all the League of Legends subreddit and the Valorant subreddit and all of those things as if it's one subreddit. So there's like different features that they've made or just like done better than Reddit in terms of their app and their layout and everything. And so most of these apps have like a free one that has ads and everything, or you can do like buy like a lifetime subscription or a yearly subscription or whatever for like a pro membership kind of thing. So that's where they get most of their money from, but it's like relatively small in terms of like the cost compared to this new cost that Reddit is rolling out that's like just gonna just eat them alive. So
I can understand how that would be frustrating for, I mean, just a whole bunch of different parties, like you were saying, from the moderators to content creators to just
users,
just all
like,
sorts of things. Yeah,
like I said, I have not used for the pretty much in the entire time that I've had a smartphone. I've had Reddit pretty much, and I have never used the official Reddit app. In all of that
that's
time.
wild to me. That's very surprising.
Well, they didn't have an app early on, and so anything
you would just have to go to the web page,
which was not really a well structured like mobile web page. So these other apps like made it way easier and built their own little market share.
I understand.
And everything, and so I've just continued to and like when I switched from a Samsung to an iPhone, I was like I Googled like what are the best Reddit apps for iPhone, because Reddit is fun. The one I used on Samsung is not in the Apple App Store. So I was like, well, I want to find something that's similar and all, and that's kind of what I ended up doing.
Gotcha. So they add some features, maybe ease of access, a little bit of customization.
More user friendly too, and like
fair,
yeah. So that's kind of where I was at with it. I'm very comfortable. I don't feel like learning a whole new like app for something that I just periodically scroll. I liked having my like structure to it. So I think it kind of brings up the question of like what happens here. Like there's a lot of people that are upset. Obviously a lot of Reddit's like community heads are very upset about this too, with the moderation teams and everything, for this many people to kind of black out their subreddits. So it kind of like brings the question of like, does something else start to come up? Does someone create a new app or forum that is going to potentially start competing with Reddit because of these things? That's kind of where my mind goes with it. But
Yeah, most likely. I mean, especially like you said, from the user base that feels, I don't want to use the word like marginalized, but like maybe,
Kind of slighted, maybe, I think is a decent word. Like,
yeah, there you
yeah.
go. Yeah, they're definitely gonna look for somewhere else to get that info, maybe that sense of community, that sense of like conversation. But then also, yeah, the people that just like use that for their like daily news feed kind of thing, just like to see what's going on in the world. Um, yeah, that's big time unfortunate, and like you alluded to, yeah, I imagine there will be some type of competitor.
Yeah, because I feel like it just creates a little bit of a vacuum. Because I think the idea from Reddit's side is they want to capitalize on all of their market share, and by doing this, they push out all third party apps while they can keep the cost that their app uses at zero, and kind of force everyone into using that instead, where they can monetize that however they wish, and kind of
Hmm.
monopolize their data. And whether you think it's like I'm not even like going on a, well, they have the right to do it because it's their data, everyone's giving them this information by making posts and posting articles and yada yada yada. Like, I'm not
Yep.
even going that far with it. I just think it's a dick thing to do, because like I think you're just like irritating a ton of people for no particular reason. Well, for to try and make a little bit of money. So it's, yeah, that's where I dislike it, as opposed to the whole they have the right to do this because they're a business. Like, yeah, technically they do.
Hmm.
It's still a dick thing to do. So
Yeah, yeah, it seems like it, especially like, yeah, there is kind of a silly feeling that comes along with like trying to monetize the internet, where like especially where you have these, newspaper outlets that have their like
oh yeah,
online business, and they want you to like pay a subscription to like read an article and stuff. It's like
sorry, New
you're
York Times.
right, right. It just feels like you're likely just doing more damage. Where I'm just like, okay, I just won't read it. I'm not going to come back to you at all. So I'm curious if it ends up being, ends up creating the inverse reaction where people are just like, okay, never mind. Like, we don't care about your product now and at all. Like, the beauty of it was that it was all free and like
Right.
crowdsourced and open and whatever. So yeah, yeah, I'm interested to see what happens, because that's wild. I mean, Reddit is
It's
as
massive.
ubiquitous as like Google or something is.
Mm.
So yeah, that's kind of wild, but I guess they want to be capitalizing on that and can't blame them. But
Yeah, I mean, like I said, they're well within their rights as a company and all, but I think it's gonna, yeah, potentially do more harm than it does good, where people are
hmm.
just gonna be like, yeah, like, I'm good, like, I don't need to deal with that, I'll go elsewhere. Um, but to move on to another topic, there was a trailer released, I guess on Saturday, for a new Star Wars video game that's going to be the first open world Star Wars game. It does seem a little bit different from some other open world games like Skyrim or the Elder Scrolls and whatnot, where it is you are a certain character from the start, but where you go and what you do and travel through the Star Wars universe is like kind of free up to you, with a kind of slight background storyline similar to like Elder Scrolls games that you can kind of accomplish, but if you also want to, you can just go and do all the side things and like mess around and whatnot. So there's no release date as of yet, but it looks pretty cool, and I most likely will get it and play it out once it comes out.
Hell yeah. Now, are you a like how on a scale from Padawan to Jedi Master, how into Star Wars are you?
Um, I would be like a like a normal Jedi, probably not like a
Okay.
Jedi Master, but pretty far up there.
Okay.
My mom loved Star Wars growing up, and so from the movies back in the 70s and 80s, and so we watched all of those with her, and then like opening night of episode 1, 2, 3, kind of all the way up through going to the movies and all with my mom when I was a kid, and then now I've watched like pretty much all of the tertiary Star Wars content from Mandalorian to Boba Fett. Whoa. To I've watched almost all of the cartoons. They've come out with a couple ones that are geared towards like little kids. And right. So those I'm like, I don't need to watch that, but
interesting.
But yeah, so okay. I'm a pretty big fan. I've watched a ton of it, but also it's just like it's like a cool world or universe, I guess, too. Like I've played through they had a Jedi, I'm blanking on the name of it, but there's a Star Wars like game that I played about a year ago. They just recently came out with a second.
Oh, talk about Survivor.
Yes. So, and so I guess that's the second one. I forget what the first one was called, but I played through the first one. I'll probably play through the second one, but to be able to go and just like travel the Star Wars universe and like see all these different things in video game form, I think is pretty neat. So.
Nice. Okay. Very cool. Yeah, I was gonna ask about Jedi Survivor. I think it's like Fallen Order or something, and then the new one that's coming out. Now, were you a big fan? Like my favorite Star Wars video game was Battlefront and Battlefront 2 for the PlayStation and original Xbox. Like that was my shit. And kind of what you're alluding to where like, yeah, you don't have to play as like Luke Skywalker. You're not like a main character. You're just a droid on the battlefield, or you're just like a Wookiee or a stormtrooper or whatever. So I thought that element was very cool. Now I understand much different open world versus like scenario game, but that is a wonderful universe to get to explore kind of in that open fashion. Hopefully you can just be a bounty hunter if you want to. Hopefully you can just be a scrapper if you want to. I think that'd be cool.
Yeah, and like I said, the thing that's different about this one, and which they may branch out off of, but I think so far you are one specific person. It's not as customizable like in, like say Skyrim, for instance. Like sure. You are the Dragonborn, and so in this, it's like you are the Dragonborn, and that makes you this person instead of you are the Dragonborn, and you can be this race or that person or this guy and like
gotcha.
Create your own character. But I think that my favorite Star Wars video game was the good old Star Wars Episode 1 Pod Racer, which I played, I think, on the Game Boy Color. It was sweet. It had a rumble pack on the back that you had to put a battery in that would like shake when different stuff happened. It was sick. So
so that's what those thick Game Boy cartridges were. They were the rumble pack cartridges.
Yeah, it was like it had the normal slot that fits in, and then it had this like bubbled out like thing on
the
it.
Battery. Yep. Whoa. I never knew what those things were. I was like, whoa, what game is that for?
Yeah, or whether it was a battery or that was like the little motor that rumbled and it used the battery off the game. I forget exactly, but sure. I know that's like, yeah, it was.
Whoa, yeah. Star Wars Pod Racer. That's awesome.
Pretty fun. But looking forward to that game. Like I said, there's no estimated release date yet, but it was just the trailer dropped recently, so it'll probably be like within the next year or so sure. that'll come out. But
that's sick.
Yeah. But moving on to kind of a decently meaty quick hitter. Lost my words for a second. But looking at the LeMans 24-hour race, that just happened this past weekend. For one, this is the first time that I've really followed it much, but it was a pretty exciting weekend. Like, one of those exciting things was that there was a new category that was introduced that had just one car in it, which was a modified NASCAR car. So it had headlights. It used different fuel with a larger fuel tank for the 24-hour race. The bigger spoiler, some different underbody things and diffusers. And so this car came in with a 150 horsepower advantage on the GTE cars that we're going to be racing at Le Mans, which was the third category of the racers, the LMGTEs. And so it was kind of like, leading up to it, it seemed like everyone was like from Europe was joking about it, but then they saw during the practice sessions the NASCAR car come out and actually just like, it was just straight up faster by like 4 seconds or so than the GTE cars. So initially it was going to start at the very back as its own category. But after the practice sessions, there was actually some modifications made by the Le Mans like officials, which I thought was really good. And it was at the request of the GTE teams that the NASCAR cars started ahead of them instead of behind, because they didn't want to deal with it fighting through their traffic and potentially like some sort of incident. They were like, let's just let it run out in front until we're spaced out enough that like that it can just go make its way through relatively easily.
Gotcha.
So yeah, kind of cool, and just cool in general that that they made it work and created like this new category and everything. I think it's pretty cool. They finished what would have been kind of the back of the GTE cars that did finish, which after saying that they were like faster than all of them sounds a little silly, but they actually ended up having to do an entire gearbox change during the race at one point because their gearbox just broke on them, but they were able to get it back to the pits and like replace the entire gearbox and still get out there complete the race. So I thought that was just a pretty cool thing in general, because that's not quite what you would expect or I would not expect a team to be able to do that and still complete the race and everything. Like, that's pretty wild. So, and they were not last. There was one team, I think, one that finished behind them overall.
Wow, a full gearbox change. That's just crazy. Yeah, and then for that modified NASCAR for that category, it says competitor demonstrating new technology. So I'm guessing that's like something that they've had to, throw up every now and again. Now, Jenson Button, was he part of the team that was racing that? Is that the idea?
He was, along with Jimmy Johnson, which
Nice.
was pretty cool because, for one, Jimmy Johnson, he ended up there was a period of rain that came down during the race, and Jimmy Johnson, being a NASCAR driver, like, they very rarely drive in the rain on oval tracks. So he had only apparently driven in the rain 3 times in his career, and was out there, but was able to do fine, figure it out, and kind of make his way through. We saw a lot of accidents and whatnot throughout, including during the overnight with the rain and everything. It was a bit of mayhem, and including kind of the most exciting, like you said, the part that the people came to see with the hypercars. There was a pretty exciting fight at the front of that between Ferrari and Toyota kind of throughout the 24 hours.
Nice. I wanted to ask about the LMGTE series though. Is that Michael Fassbender for
Yes, it is.
Competizione?
Yep. So he
Dude,
he
I
was
hate to see
racing.
DNF'd.
He actually was the one who crashed out.
I mean,
He
sure.
lost, but he was doing really well throughout the weekend. But I think, on some kind of old tires, he was braking into a turn, and then as he kind of started coasting, he like tried to turn or something instead of like hitting the
Hmm.
accelerator, and just lost the end of the rear end of the car. Um,
Damn.
but I mean, up until that point, was doing pretty well. So
That's wild. I mean, cause bro was this the first year that he competed at Le Mans, or has he done it before?
I think this was the first year, but um,
Dude, that sucks because I remember he had this like whole like road to Le Mans like YouTube video series where it like shows him training and practicing.
yeah, so
Damn.
he was their team was driving a Porsche 911, and he crashed into a barricade at what is known as the Porsche Curves section. So that's kind of a ironic, but yeah, I think it was his first one
Whoa.
being a part of that, but still like really cool to see someone kind of that, or from a different world, competing at a high level in racing. That's pretty neat.
Well, I think that's the idea behind those videos is like he was trying to say like no, I'm of this world too, you know,
Yeah,
trying to hack it. Well, I look forward to the results for next year. See if he can get a big finish. So that's very cool from the GTE category. But yeah, moving up like you were saying, back up to the hypercar. Sorry, talking about the competition between the Ferraris and the Toyotas.
yeah, and so kind of throughout, there were a number of times where the Ferraris and Toyotas changed leads depending on when there were pit stops, and they were for like a long time of this race, probably close to 90% of this race were on the same lap. And so these laps are about, I think, 3 to 3.5 minutes per lap. So it's a long circuit. But nonetheless, for all that time to stay like on the same lap, and be that close together was really wild. The number seven Toyota car was actually the one that was competing at the highest, like at the front the most early on, but they ended up crashing out and DNFing. But the Ferraris ended up getting a nice little lead with of like 3 to 4 minutes or so, with about 25 minutes left to go in the race, and they went in for their final pit stop, and the car actually stalled out, and like they had to, this happened a couple times during the race, but they had to entirely reboot the car and all the systems and everything. So for a moment, it was like, after 23 hours and 35 minutes and them having a decently sizable lead, that they weren't going to give up in that last little bit without something happening. It kind of opened the door for Toyota a little bit, but they were able to get the car booted back up and ended up getting it going to finish the race and take the win, which was exciting. This is the 100th anniversary of Le Mans. This is, I think, from what I heard, the first time that a Ferrari has competed in it in 50 years or so,
Whoa.
at least at that highest level. And so a big win for them, which is pretty cool.
Damn, that's pretty crazy. Now, what happened to the Toyota driver Hirakawa? did he mess up the stint for the Toyotas there in the end? Like,
Yeah,
wouldn't there have
so
been ground to gain there for them?
probably, but he did. I think it still would have gone in Ferrari's favor overall, but he did spin off and hit the wall,
Mm-hmm.
lost the rear of the car, so dinged up the rear wing and a little bit of the front fender. And then, of course, it takes those cars a little bit of time to find reverse and then to kind of make a little like 5 point turn to get back on the track and going. But yeah, I don't think it would have made a difference, but it was. It definitely didn't help them as they were kind of trying to make a little late comeback there.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Yeah, I feel like if your opponents are making a mistake late in the race, you got to be there to punish. That's unfortunate. That kind of at the same time, Toyota's like running into their own issues, and Ferrari gets to like
Yeah, but
because it's their lead to lose. I'll say like they get away with it, kind of thing.
they had enough leeway that the issues didn't hurt them, um but yeah, I mean it's just kind of it's wild how just like all the component like this is the first endurance race that I've really paid attention to that much,
Hmm.
and it's just the whole thing is crazy. Like it makes sense that there are so many incidents and everything that are driver error because you're just doing like these such long stints. I don't remember how long like most teams were doing before switching out drivers, but you're doing probably like three different multi-hour shifts like throughout this race, which is just wild, and makes it really exciting to kind of follow. But with the big win for Ferrari with Pierre Guidi, Collado, and Antonio Giovinazzi, familiar F1 name.
Best hair in the biz.
Now Charles Leclerc is the least accomplished of former Alfa Romeo drivers, or at least Alfa Romeo drivers from 2018 to 2021. Because Marcus Ericsson was his teammate, who now has an Indy 500 win. We've got Antonio with a Le Mans win, and then Kimi was the other driver in that era who is an F1 world champion. So now Leclerc is surpassed by Antonio Giovinazzi for driving accomplishments to his name. I mean,
I doubt Charles Leclerc thinks of it that way, but that's a hilarious angle for the journalists
yeah.
to poke fun. Yeah,
And Charles was there watching the team like through the weekend a bit too, so he was
sure.
like checking it out, enjoying it and everything. But I did see that, and I'm like, that's kind of funny because
That is very funny.
I would consider him in most cases a better racer than Antonio and Marcus Ericsson. Marcus Ericsson is making it a tougher argument, but definitely than Antonio. So
Well, maybe not so much now with
yeah,
the
not
Le Mans
anymore.
win. It's not we can't clown him so much. Now I'm curious, is Le Mans part of the WEC? Is that like one of the events on the World Endurance Championship calendar?
I believe so.
Much
I'm
like the
pretty
Indy
sure.
500 is. Like
Yeah,
that's just one IndyCar race that people are going to tune into, but that's part of their whole year. That
right.
factors into the big thing.
Yeah, so there's
Gotcha.
let's see here.
So that means, so is Michael Fassbender racing in the WEC?
Um that I actually am not sure. But
That's
I
interesting.
don't think the Indy 500 at least next year doesn't look like it is considered part of the WEC. They have the Qatar 1812 kilometer Italy 6 hours of Imola, Belgium 6 hours of Spa, France 24 hours of Le Mans, Brazil 6 hours of Sao Paulo, Lone Star Le Mans at Circuit of the Americas, 6 hours of Fuji, and the 8 hours of Bahrain. So, so I think the Indy 500 probably has been at different points because it is a pretty long race. But
oh no, I was just saying the Indy 500 is part of the IndyCar series.
I thought you meant part of the, because a 500 laps on that track is still like a lot of racing, so I wouldn't have been shocked if it was, time. But okay, I got you. Yes,
I just meant I should have said respectively.
I got you. So yeah, the it is part of the WEC like calendar and like series.
Gotcha. That's sick. Yes. Okay, I understand. And then the Triple Crown is a win at Monaco, a win at Le Mans, and a win at the Indy 500.
Yeah, I think so. Yep. Monaco, Indy 500, and 24-hour Le Mans.
Wild.
Yeah.
And to be in... Okay, so here's the angle that I find most interesting about that is not even the caliber of racer that you have to be, the type of driver and racer that is connected enough to get a seat in each of them, because each of those races are going on like during the year of the, like, they're all happening at the same time. So in the modern era, to get that done just would be like a feat of scheduling.
A feat of schedule, or just like impressive like generational talent that someone would be able to have a career length long enough to do each one at separate times, because they're most likely not going to all be able to be done in the same year with the level of competition that these drivers, like Max can't go and train for Le Mans
right
like during the F1 season. It's just not feasible. But to like kind of, I'll bring it back around to this conversation with the Triple Crown a little bit, as I wanted to get into a couple other like little news things, but I'll bring it shortly back around. But one article that came out, I saw a couple different places, was there was this conversation about Mercedes and Toto missing the opportunity to sign Max as a young driver and everything. And so the story is actually pretty interesting of how Max ended up with Red Bull. But the short of it is that Max was a prodigy in karting coming up and everything, but his dad basically didn't... while he was in karting, was like, we're not signing with any junior program until he is going into single seaters and everything. So he went up into F3, unaffiliated with any junior program, had an amazing F3 year, and then Mercedes approached him with an offer to go into one of their other like upcoming teams on one of the slightly higher levels of racing and everything, to bring him into the Mercedes like junior driver program with this like path of growth. And so what Helmut Marko did to kind of snatch him away from Mercedes, who at the time was much more successful. This is after Vettel had left, and the championships that Red Bull won in the 2010-ish time frame, Mercedes was now the head of the field by a lot. And so Helmut Marko offered him the drive in F1 at Toro Rosso straight from F3 as kind of the trump card for Red Bull to bring him in. Whoa. Instead of saying...
Mercedes was offering like a junior program.
They were like, you'll drive for this team in F2 as a Mercedes junior driver, and then if you like keep progressing, then you'll like, you can come into like like whatever Williams
Sure.
yeah, and so
More of like a
like a George
three-step.
Russell kind of trajectory.
Yeah.
But
But Helmut Marko says right into an F1 seat on
Yep.
Toro Rosso. Whoa.
And so that is how he ended up getting that jump. Was there was competition for him, and I didn't realize that. I thought that Red Bull just like saw this which they did, but I didn't think that or realize that the kind of competition was what brought out that that card up the sleeve for Red Bull to
That's
bring Max
crazy.
on board. So yeah, I was reading through all of this the other day after I saw the article came out about Toto kind of being like, I mean, like looking back and being like, man, I wish we could have like brought him onto our side because look how good he is. Like, I think any team that had a shot at that would probably be doing the same thing.
And maybe not even with like a regretful eye, but just saying like, yeah, we had the opportunity, we kind of squandered it. Maybe in the future we'll think differently, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and so like kind of bringing it back around towards like what you're talking about with the Triple Crown and all. There was another article from a Le Mans winner, Richard Bradley, who said that basically he was saying that for Max to be considered an F1 great of all time, he needs to have won in an inferior car, and then like named off other people who have done so and whatnot. And I think that that's kind of like a bit disingenuous. One, because like Max has had some success obviously in F1 and 2 world championships. I think alone puts you up as one of the greats, even if your car was very good during those times. But also Max did have 10 wins in the years from 2016 just to 2020. So before he won the Drivers' Championship in 2021, in 4 years that Mercedes, I guess like 5 years that Mercedes was just dominating races, as a very young driver, he still managed to get 10 wins in that time frame in an inferior Red Bull car. So I think from that perspective, yeah, he hasn't won a driver's championship in an inferior car. Not many people do. But I think that kind of speaks to to him as a driver, even though it didn't mean like a driver's championship. Or I also think that this guy is just trying to get his name in the headlines a little bit, but
yeah, that sounds a little like, it just sounds a bit silly to me in the sense of like, okay, so do we start taking away from like Michael Schumacher and saying like, but he was in a Ferrari?
Well, like you'd probably like be like, well, these years he was just had a really good car, but these years he actually had to battle for it, kind of thing.
Fair.
But like also like in 2021, whatever you consider of that championship, like Max was competing with that Mercedes of Lewis Hamilton, who people do consider to be an all-time great, if not the greatest in F1 history. And like whether you say the Red Bull was slightly faster or slightly slower, like they were pretty level throughout that season as we saw them taking wins off each other kind of throughout the year. Like that, I think, showing him compete for an entire season with someone who is considered an all-time great in F1, I think also is like a good notch in the belt or whatever, feather in the cap.
Yeah, and Lewis was in like a dominant car too. Like, yeah. I don't know, that's just a silly take. Okay, so remove that. But let's actually like think about it. So there's something there. There's something there that feels like when you talk about like League of Legends pros, or even like just like esports pros in general, or even like, you know, I've heard the argument about like basketball players too, where it's like, yeah, but they had like a better like supporting cast, or like this player did it with no like supporting cast. I think overall it just, if anything, it's just a bit of context for the story. I don't think it is weighted that heavily on the individual because the individual doesn't have a whole lot of control over the team decisions, over like,
Right.
staff decisions, this and that. So to be like he never did it in an inferior car, I think is the phrase is moving the goalpost.
Yeah, and I think it's like an odd thing because at the same time this past week leading up to the 24 hours of Le Mans, Jenson Button also was, during an interview, basically said that for Lewis and Max to be considered two of the best drivers in the world, that they would need to do something outside of F1 to be in consideration for that. Where I still don't necessarily think that's true. I think that it would like answer plenty of questions for people of, oh, like, can they do it in these other series or whatnot. Like we've seen Jenson Button drive in NASCAR. He's now done this endurance race. I don't know if he had done the 24 hours of Le Mans previously, but he's done other things outside of F1 and shown that he's like at a competitive level in those other ones as well, to some extent. So it's, I think it brings up like the interesting question of like, do you consider like the best F1 drivers to be like part of that group of like best drivers in the world, or do you need, like, for anyone to be considered one of the best in the world, do they need to like prove that they're better than the people of series that they haven't competed against? Like, or if you're talking about the NBA, like, for you to say LeBron is the best in the world, like, he has to have competed against like players from other countries, like he has in the Olympics and things like that. Mm-hmm. And so you can consider him that. But if he had never played in the Olympics or in the Australian League or European League of basketball or whatever, like, that would be like saying, oh, well, you can't say LeBron's like one of the best basketball players in the world because he's only played in America. Like, that's how that feels to me, which seems kind of silly.
There are not enough opportunities for cross-discipline racing to make the argument really strong that they actually are the best in the world. There is a sense in which I feel like they would be among the top of any series competitors, but to just outright say that they would be 1, 2, or 3 on any given track, like within, let's say, like 1 year of competition, I think would be very tough.
Well, yeah, but I don't, mean, yeah.
Like, look at Grosjean. I mean, my man comes from F1. When he's finishing races, he's slotting in, like, really well to the IndyCar and, like, staying on that like top end of average. But if there were more opportunities for cross-discipline racing, I would be more inclined to give it to you that they are in fact the best in the world. If we see like 3 times a year a Lewis Hamilton go to some other race and just fucking dominate, like that would make it so much easier for me to, I guess, believe what I think we are supposed to intuitively know by them being in F1.
I agree with you there.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, and I agree with you in, like, I'm not, I guess it's like, so Jenson Button said for them to be considered 2 of the best drivers in the world, like 2 of the best. And I think they should be considered 2 of the best drivers in the world currently. However, I agree with you on the side of like, I'm not going to say that they are better than every other driver in the world that in other racing series that they haven't competed against, because like you just don't know. And so on that aspect, I agree with you. If you're trying to like make a ranking and say who's number 1 and number 2 in the world this year in all of like single seater or like just like motor car racing, like it would be hard to necessarily just go up Lewis and Max 1-2 kind of thing. But if you're just saying 2 of the greatest drivers in the world, like I think that's a pretty easy, like, yeah, they are.
Right. Yes. That's the weird, like, very small distinction, but yeah, that's what I agree with too.
Yeah, but I do, like, to be honest, I kind of imagine that we will get opportunities to see Max doing some of these other things. We may see Max get a Triple Crown in his lifetime. It doesn't sound like oval track racing is something that he's interested in. He actually, I think, said that it kind of freaks him out a little bit because of how high speed the crashes and everything can be. But for one, I think he would do pretty well in IndyCar. One, because he's really good with like his tire life, which would be a big thing in IndyCar. And two, he drives decently aggressively when he wants to, and IndyCar definitely has a lot of that with people barging in and late dives and everything. Like,
yeah,
I
you
think,
can bump each other there.
I think Max would suit IndyCar pretty well, but I know he also does have like a big passion for endurance racing, so I wouldn't be surprised after he leaves F1 to see him driving Le Mans.
Right. Whoa.
So
you heard it here first. Max to be the next.
I think
winner.
I think he's the only current driver that I can think of that has a shot to do it. Not that he necessarily will or will even go for it, but I think he's the only current driver. He's already got the Monaco win. He loves endurance racing and has said that he would want to drive at Le Mans. So yeah. I think between just those two things already, you would almost like have to give him the highest odds of doing it of any current driver.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
So,
whoa.
But anyway, moving forward into some other F1 little chit chat. There are just a few drivers whose contracts I want to remind everyone are ending at the end of 2023 and have not currently signed new contracts. So Lewis is one, hasn't re-signed quite yet with Mercedes. Nico Hülkenberg and Kevin Magnussen for Haas. Zhou Guanyu at Alfa Romeo. Yuki and Nick DeVries at AlphaTauri, and then Logan Sargent for Williams. So I think it is... it just kind of leaves some questions up in the air. I think with some of the performances that we've seen, to kind of wait and see who's going to get the like re-signed and whatnot. When I was actually looking back, because... And I saw this tweet about the head-to-heads for the season so far, because I had said last week that I was pretty sure that Hülkenberg had smoked Magnussen in qualies, but not necessarily in the race. Hülkenberg is 5-2 head-to-head in qualifying against Magnussen, but Magnussen has a 4-3 lead in race days.
Gotcha.
So, looking at that, Yuki, of course, he's 6-1 in races to DeVries and 5-2 in qualifying to him. Alex Albon similarly has a big lead on Logan Sargent. So just looking at some of these drivers, DeVries is definitely struggling in that head-to-head with his teammate, so is Logan Sargent. Zhou Guanyu is having... like a pretty solid, he's 4-3 with Valtteri in both quali and the races, so I would kind of expect him to get re-signed, and then it comes to the Haas guys. And I mean, I'd say they're decently close in their competitiveness there as well. It just depends what Haas is kind of looking to do in the future, if they're going to continue to kind of build this car and everything with two more veteran drivers, or are they going to kind of start looking elsewhere for someone to bring into one of those seats and possibly grow a little bit from a younger driver perspective?
Yeah, and it's tough because you don't really see them excelling in like one area or another, where they were talking about wanting more like veteran driver in the car to help them develop it, where they were having problems with the car being competitive on the track. So now you get a couple of veteran drivers in, you get, the car's improving, but like you're talking about those contract signings are coming up here. So you're curious what Haas is going to do. Like, do they feel like their car is in a good enough like development place where they can kind of look for a younger talent that they can, maybe he's got a little more speed, but they got to hone him in a little bit. Or, you stick with Hulkenberg and Magnussen and say, like, no, like, we need some more help, like, developing this package of car. It doesn't feel like either one is really great for them currently, just based on their kind of, like, just medium performances overall. We've seen some highlights, but more lowlights, and kind of like more of the same overall from Haas. So I'm curious, yeah, like you were saying, what they're going to go for and what they're like kind of selecting for here.
Yeah, and I think like what I would imagine is probably the most optimal position based on where they're at right now would to do a 1 year extension for both drivers.
Yeah.
Because I feel like the goal of Haas bringing in the veteran drivers, I think was what you and I thought initially of, one, like having veteran drivers to like drive the car, help like give good feedback and input and everything. But two, on the other side of that, I think a big part is also the fact that they have reduced the amount of incidents and crashes and damage to the car by having two veteran drivers in, because now they can actually put the money towards development instead of putting the money towards fixing the cars and all. And so
That's a great point.
I think that will allow them to kind of continue to close the gap and everything. We saw Hulkenberg get that P3 qualify or really high up qualifying last week. Was it I feel like
It was P5 in Canada
P5
last year.
Well, P5 in Canada last year, but what was his qualifying in Spain? It was P8 in Spain, and then he had one other one I felt like earlier this year that was pretty high up qualifying, but I could be.
No, I think that was last year.
Yeah, Magnussen had the P4 in Miami. So I think that might be what I was thinking of.
Gotcha. Okay.
But either way, like I think they have started to go in the right direction a little bit, even though it hasn't quite gotten them to that spot where they're really competitive for points week in or week out. I think we're seeing some progress with the car, and I think another year with the two of them there would not be like a big detriment. So that's what I would imagine we end up seeing with them for next season for Haas.
Yeah, that seems pretty reasonable. 1 year extension. I kind of like the sound of that for that.
Yeah. And then the last little quick hitter was just talking about contracts and all. Lance Stroll's contract isn't up, but there was an article that I saw about Aston Martin and kind of the dilemma for Lawrence Stroll if they keep building on the progress of this car and everything. They have one driver who has this season consistently been up there. We've seen Fernando be on the podium, I think, 4 times now, if not 5, with a number of P3 and then last week's P2 last week's P2 at Spain. So with
No,
Lance, like,
Fernando wasn't on the podium. It was Max,
no,
Lewis, George.
sorry, it was 2 weeks ago in Monaco.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's correct. But with Fernando, like, having these performances and putting the car up there, not that Lance is having bad performances, but Lance could potentially be holding the team back from potentially being a title contender in the next like year or two if they continue to like battle here at the front with the Aston Martin.
Whoa.
Is basically the conundrum of this article. And it's just like an interesting thing to think about as we think about other contracts, what may happen in the next like year. I think Lance has one more year on his contract before it's up at the end of 2024. But that is interesting to kind of think about and to wonder what Aston Martin will do. Because obviously Lawrence, I'm sure, would love to have his son continue to drive in the car and be a competitive racer in F1, which he is. But at
Mm-hmm.
the same time, like, kind of, he may not have quite what they need to be a title contender potentially. I mean, not to I'm not trying to knock him because he's definitely shown really good performances and pace this year. So
But it does seem like Fernando is continually getting the better of him in that head to head, which means he's like driving the car more on the limit than Lance is. And
yeah,
if it comes down to it where like weekend in and weekend out, they need points, um, it like for a closer battle than they're in now. I don't know if you get that kind of reliability out of Lance. Like you were saying, he drives pretty well, but it doesn't seem like he's like wringing the neck of that car all the
right.
time. And it seems like that's what you really need. Two drivers to be putting up numbers to have a shot in the constructors championship. So
Yeah.
yeah, I could see how that would be a concern moving forward.
Yeah, and for their head-to-head comparison, like, it is 6-1 in race and quali for in Fernando's favor,
Oh yeah.
and he probably could have beat Lance in the race in Spain, but decided like chose not to fight him and just waved to the crowd during his last lap
Yep.
instead. So it could even be if he really wanted to gun for Lance, it probably could be 7-0 in races for Fernando. So I think just in general, it's an interesting thing to think about as we're like going and looking at these contract negotiations and whatnot. But looking at Spain this week, the one little fun bit of news that I saw was that Daniel Ricciardo is going to be doing an alternate stream telecast on ESPN2. So he and Will Arnett, the actor comedian, will be hosting a kind of alternative cast of the race. More of like what they do for Peyton Manning and his brother Eli for some NFL games, where you just have them kind of chit chatting as they're watching the game and all. So I think it'll be that kind of vibe. Danny probably doing a little bit of describing what's going on and whatnot, and then some just chit chat in the background. I won't be watching it, but I'll be looking for like any funny highlights afterwards. I'll still be watching the
Is
main the main
is
cast.
Will Arnett Canadian?
I don't know actually. I wouldn't be surprised.
Gotcha, because that kind of makes sense for the, like for promo reasons for the
Yes,
weekend.
he is Canadian. He's from Toronto. So
Gotcha. There we go. That's why Canadian Grand Prix, Canadian comedian.
yeah, and it seems like he's actually going to do it for a couple. There's going to be 3 races that they do this for through the rest of the season. So
Whoa.
it will be for Canada. Let's see here. Canada, the U.S. Grand Prix at Circuit of the Americas, and then for Las Vegas as well. So the American and Canadian races left for the season.
Gotcha. Whoa, that sounds pretty fun.
Yeah, so I'm sure there will be some fun clips and highlights. Like I said, no offense to either of them, but I'll be watching the main broadcast of the race. But we do have that coming up. It's going to be a lovely 2 p.m. race this Sunday up there in the circuit Gilles Villeneuve. And looking at last year's race, it was pretty tight at the end of it. We had some late incidents with Yuki, I think, going out right at the end that brought out a safety car and had Max defending on slightly older tires ahead of Carlos Sainz for the rest of the race. But another note that I found interesting was Alonso started P2 on the grid last year at Canada in the Alpine. And so now with a pretty competitive Aston Martin car, it will be interesting to see because it seems as though he is pretty comfortable at the circuit. So he may have a pretty good turnout here as well.
Yeah, hopefully. And unfortunately, I think Aston Martin fell a bit behind there in Spain this past outing. So hopefully, if I understood correctly, they have some upgrades planned here for the weekend. So they're looking to kind of close that gap and hopefully kind of recoup some losses from Spain.
Yeah, kind of retake that lead, I think, from Mercedes in the constructors standings and everything. Alonso still is ahead of both of the Mercedes drivers in the drivers, but they're now 18 points back in the constructors to Mercedes. So hopefully able to recoup some of those points and bring that fight for second place in the constructors.
Yeah, and also there was from last year's race, I know both Magnussen and Mick Schumacher had some pretty good qualifying here last year. I think it was like 5 and 6 on the grid for the start of the race. Obviously, it didn't last there very long, but yeah, I think they went pretty well. The main big storyline I'm gonna look forward to for the weekend is if Mercedes can follow up on the 2-3 from this, the previous outing. I think that was huge for them. Obviously, they probably think it's huge for them too. So I think it'd be sweet to see them kind of follow up on that success where you've seen them just be so close, so close, so close. And to get that 2-3, I think is a really solid stepping stone moving forward into the season.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think the other team I want to keep an eye on is McLaren. We obviously saw Lando have a really great showing in the qualifying last week in Spain. So I would hope that he is able to put out another good qualifying and put himself in a good spot for the race. Hopefully keep out of trouble because I really do want to see him bounce back well from a tough shake last weekend with that. So, and for McLaren, who's struggled through the beginning stages of the year, to see them kind of build on what they've done so far and make some progress moving forward.
Yeah, especially for Piastri, who I think is, I think he's like fun to watch on these weekends. So you hope they give him a good package.
Yeah, I think that he, like we had said, he's probably the best rookie on the grid this year. He's having like a really solid start to the season. So yeah, looking for him to continue to put some good performances out there. But yeah, I think that's all I got for F1 with the Canadian Grand Prix.
Well, I think the biggest thing here for the Canadian Grand Prix is I hope you're not watching the main cast. I hope you're not watching the Will Arnett cast. I hope you are gonna watch our cast of the Canadian Grand Prix. We got a companion coming up for you guys this weekend. So if you want to check that out, we'll have that up on YouTube for the Canadian Grand Prix. Little race companion here from from the boys at the tall and short of it, so that'll be a good time.
Yep.
But yeah, other than that, Canadian Grand Prix this weekend. Put it into your faces.
Yeah, check it out. We'll have that up on YouTube shortly after the race and everything. So looking forward to that. But to shift over to some League of Legends, just to touch on the LCS quickly before we get over to the LCK. The LCS Players Association and Riot and the teams came to an agreement. So they're going to be resuming the summer split on, or starting the summer split on Wednesday this week. And as a reminder, we're recording this on Monday, so it's a couple days from now. But the gist of it was that that Riot is going to look to put emphasis and whatnot onto building the infrastructure for younger players and the pipeline for players to make it into the LCS. But unfortunately, that with that agreement, they're not doing as much for the players that kind of got shafted in the meantime. So some of the young talent that just lost their contracts, their teams, and whatnot, suddenly are going to get a small severance pay, and then that's about it. So it's like
they can still make it onto squads, but it's going to be very tough.
But yeah, because it's like, how do you prove yourself to these teams if you're not playing on a team for this whole
Ranked
next
fives.
split and everything? So yeah,
Clash tournaments.
There you go. Just big NA Clash tournaments. So yeah, it's not ideal, but at the same time, like, I do understand that in these negotiations, like, it does come to a compromise, like, pretty much always. Like, for the NFL and other leagues that have had this that I was kind of mentioning, the players don't get every single thing that they're hoping for in these negotiations. So it's not always ideal, but it's a way that we'll be moving forward with the LCS and North America, and hopefully they can build that infrastructure and pipeline for the players to come up through, so that North America can attempt to be successful for many years to come.
Fourth best region in the world, baby.
Yep, just lock it in. But to move over, well, and like we said, LCS starting this week on Wednesday, June 14th. We've also got LEC back this week with their summer split kicking off on, I think it's Friday, or no, we've got Saturday this week where they'll start off their spring season, which is just their round robins, and then they will go on to their group stages and everything like they've had for the previous two splits that they've had since they broke it up into three this year. So keeping the same kind of structure and all there in the LEC.
Right.
For the LPL, just looking at standings, Billy Gaming was able to pull out two more series wins since we last chatted. So they're now 5-0 at the top of the league, ahead of Top Esports at 4-1, JD Gaming at 4-1, and Team WE, who are 3-0 there. So Billy Gaming is just continuing their strong play that they brought out of MSI.
Damn, that's pretty impressive, especially being that, like, they were definitely not the best team at the tournament. And it's surprising where they're they must have taken what they basically what I'm trying to say is they must have taken what they learned at MSI, really kind of converted it, and just have been on a barnstorm, because they really do look like a different squad, to be fair. Some of the like, I would say like, overcommitments from BLG don't seem to ail them as much as they were at MSI.
And to also be fair on the other side, they have only played one team so far that's in the top half of the standings. There, they've played
Okay.
Ultra Prime, who they did get a 2-0 against, who is seventh right now in the LPL. But their other wins over OMG in 11th place, EDG in 12th place, Thunder Talk in or no, they're going to be playing Thunder Talk, I think, coming up. But Anyone's Legend is 16th in the league, so they haven't played the top of the table yet, which is where we'll
Gotcha.
really get to see kind of what level they are carrying through, and if it's when they rematch JDG, we'll see kind of where they're at, I think.
Gotcha. Okay, so it's a little bit of a question of the strength of schedule here.
Exactly. A little bit.
Okay. Okay,
So,
fair enough. Fair enough. I can appreciate that. Over in the LCK, we had a pretty good matchup between the two Titan teams. We had Gen.G versus T1, and it was actually a pretty exciting matchup. Some interesting things to talk about, like from a meta perspective, and then just some interesting moments in the game. So we saw a priority from Gen.G on the Nico pick, which is really interesting. Apparently, the base damages are really high, so the poke is just like relentless, forces Faker into like an early like boot start plus like sustain. So Faker's goal in the end, he was just to like survive the early game, just like live through and be able to dodge the poke coming through from the Nico. So that was kind of an interesting pick. And then we also have the new champion Milio. He is live on the current patch. One of the kind of priority duo lanes is the Milio plus Draven combo. That little campfire that he puts out increases your attack damage range. So for Draven, who's like a shorter range carry, that's like all he needs is that extra range, and he can do the rest. So that Milio has been very, very high priority, as well as the Yumi Zeri. So that's kind of like what the priority's been around as far as like the pick and bans. Kesante must ban still. And the who else they were saying? Doesn't really matter.
well,
But the
Felios got banned
Kesante,
out in every game as well.
Othelio seems to be still pretty strong in the meta. Yeah, I think that's a
Vi
good thing. Yes,
also,
that
yeah.
was it. The jungler Vi, top jungler currently. So that there was big prio around that. So game one for Gen.G, it just came down to the team fights for Doran. He was super strong come like the mid and late game fight, just always able to sit on top of Gumayusi's Draven, and was not enough. So in the course of the team fights, Gen.G wins game one.
Well, and
Go ahead.
to talk with the Nico as well, like Chovy was getting some really nice flanks off with it, and like you said, base
Yeah.
damage is up. But I think they may have changed, and this may have happened a little while ago, but I think they may have changed her invisibility to give a little bit of additional time for it, because I
Okay.
remember at least I know it's been a while since I've played much League, but previously playing Nico, that was one of my biggest gripes with her, was that when you use your clone and go invisible, that you really can't cover very much ground to try and get a good ultimate off and everything, and utilize that to its fullest potential. It made it really, it just was really difficult to get in and get a multi-person ult without someone already CCing a bunch of the enemy team initially. Like you were like the follow-up crowd control, where Chovy now is able to kind of find some interesting flank angles and everything from bushes and utilize that invis to catch multiple people off guard, which was I think pretty big in a couple of their team fights around the dragon pit.
Oh yeah, that was where I think Gen.G like gained a lot of their advantages. Specifically in the that little banana brush and the I don't know what brush you would call that, but like that sits slightly behind the turret over in the jungle. He had a really nice camp there, and then but part of that is also down to like T1 ward control. Just didn't have any like backup wards. Basically,
Yeah.
obviously their positioning was like a little forward. They're looking to fight for the Drake. But yeah, that was a nice little spot for Chovy to find. So team fighting overall between Chovy and Doran combined gets them game one, and then in game two we see an interesting little matchup in the top side with the Kale pick. We have Gen.G looking to get the Draven Milio on this side here. And the idea here, pretty good. Just set Draven up to be a pretty strong carry in the game. Unfortunately, we just have the owner plan just to run top lane, get Sion ahead, to where the Kale ends up kind of being a non-factor, means the Draven ends up being kind of a non-factor. T1 are able ultimately to win that game. I think Gen.G stalled out pretty well, though. There was a chance that the gold ended up turning into Gen.G's favor, but T1 able to close out game two after a really nice fight. And then game three is where it just all falls apart, and T1 has a great idea, great team comp. Like both drafts, I think were pretty good, answering each other effectively. And this is, well, maybe fall apart isn't the right word. It's where the two team comps played out kind of how they were drafted, where T1 has early pick potential, early skirmishing potential, able to find like a 4v5 really easily. But Gen.G able to kind of withstand that early pressure, get a bunch of gold on Zeri, get enough gold onto the Jax that all he's got to do is stay alive for his Counter Strike to go off, and he like ends up being okay. And yeah, just enough moments where T1 with their limited crowd control, while they had some, got nothing that just point and clicks on a Zeri and locks her up. So a bunch of the late game team fights got really hard once Zeri had the mobility, and they were just never able to get on top of her. And so then Gen.G was able to take game three pretty decidedly after a couple one team fights.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things. So two interesting notes from this series, but the team that took the Draven lost all three games. So T1 had Draven in games 1 and 3. Gen.G had it in game 2. So that's like an interesting stat. Also, getting to see, like you said, the range increase, which is kind of one of Zeri's biggest weaknesses, but having that range increase from the Melio that Delight played in the last game with the Zeri, it's interesting to see those two paired together after we had seen it with the Draven and with T1, after seeing Gen.G take the Melio first pick, going and taking the Draven away on their side, kind of forced them into a different comp. But the other thing that I found interesting from watching through, I watched back through the highlights, but the teams in this series that were kind of disengaging in team fights and then re-engaging seemed to be the ones that were coming out on top. They were, and it didn't seem necessarily that they were able to, or that they were intentionally like baiting out the team fights, but it was when they were getting caught out having enough peel to peel back and then go back in, it really seemed like maybe it's just the current burst potential in some of these games just doesn't seem quite there. I mean, we even saw Delight get hooked and Chovy get hooked towards the end of that game at a couple of different points, and to be able to make it out with whether it's throwing down a stun or just being able to kind of peel back with some of the crowd control from the rest of their team coming in. The lack of ability to blow up an individual target from both sides in the games seemed to really lend itself to whichever team then had more ultimates left to kind of win those fights. I mean, in that last game, we saw T1, I think, collapse on Peanut in the top lane, and with the Maokai, he was just able to live it out, and I think that's which one I'm thinking of. It's either that or the with Zeus on the Scion in game 2.
Yeah, where he's just able to just ult away
Yeah,
after he keeps
that's
them
what I'm
occupied
thinking
for
of.
like
Yeah, he has
4
like
to 5
4
seconds.
people collapse on him. They can't kill him. He ults away, and then the rest of the team shows up. And so
Yeah,
it
no,
was
that's a really good point.
it was just interesting. Like it stuck out to me, and I don't know if it speaks to maybe the meta or the fact that the current meta of champions that were picked here don't quite have the burstiness of some other like champion picks that we've seen with whether it be assassins or like the Akali or anything like that. But yeah, it was just an interesting note that I saw, because watching T1 get the pretty decent early lead in game 3 and then just not be able to close it out towards the end was a tough way to see that go, just in terms of like not hanging on to the lead. But really big props to Gen.G. Like you said, they did what they needed to. Jax took the Zonias to be able to have more survivability there at the end to get some of those counter strikes off on the opposing team there. And they kept Pays so safe at the end. He just was a monster.
Yeah, that's a Zeri moment for sure. Gets the penta there at the end. Yeah, just a pretty fun series from that regard. If you're a T1 fan, you know it's a tough one to take, but there will be other matchups, you know, coming up here. So many more chances. But yeah, overall, I think it was just a very fun series to check out from the LCK.
Yeah, and cool to see the Melio getting some play and starting to see what that can
Big
do a little bit.
showcase.
So very cool to see. But I know you had a couple other esports little bits and pieces that we can go through here before we bring us towards the end of the episode.
So staying on the T1 train here, there's the VCT Masters Tokyo tournament, which is the Valorant Valorant S tier tournament, I guess you would say, put on by Riot. Couple of big name teams there. I did not know that T1 had a Valorant squad, but I have to say my interest was re-peaked overall. I was like, that'd be a fun team to get behind and watch. So games started, I think, on the 11th. So gonna be tuning into that one. Another kind of tertiary esport that I'd like to tune into when available. So that's Masters Tokyo is getting ramping up. I believe we're just like in the group stages. So I'm definitely gonna check out some of the T1 games. But then bigger moment. Over the weekend, we had the culmination of the Blast Spring split season, whatever you want to call it. So the Blast Spring final was over the weekend. We had 2 banger, I'm talking like very exciting semifinals. It was G2 versus Vitality in semifinal number 2, and Heroic versus Uh, it's like infantry or something. What the hell is it? Give me the bracket. Imperial. Oh man, I'm sorry, Imperial Esports. I all weekend I was forgetting their name. I kept wanting to say Immortals because their logo looks so similar to the Immortals logo too. So it just like
Gotcha.
it never got stored in my brain as its own thing. Okay, so the second semifinal was Heroic versus Imperial. Bro, these series were so fucking exciting. So G2 versus Vitality goes all the way to 3 maps. That was just super crazy. You see G2 just popping off like crazy. Vitality comes through with some very good calls, very clean play. But it's the other series with my boy Cadian and Heroic where I thought my heart was going to get broken again. So it's map 3, overtime 1, tied 17-17. Cadians in a 1v2 with 36 health left. Imperial knows exactly where he is. So he ends up being in this like the 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 Jeopardy and what's the word? The clock is very much against him, right? So
Okay.
he's in a position you can see he kind of like checks an angle, checks another angle, and then just goes. He hops through the window, pushes aggressively towards ramp. It's on Nuke is the third map. Pushes aggressively towards the ramp room, looks for the first fight, wins. It's an op battle between him and Fallen, so basically just whoever shoots first wins. He gets the first fight on Fallen, jumps up over the railing, down onto the bomb floor, like fake opens the squeaky door, so the other CT like goes to like I guess you would say he swings the other door looking for the gun battle. KDM bop pings him, gets the 1v2, wins the round, puts him up 18-17 in the overtime, and this the Imperial economy is now shattered. They had to scrounge together a buy to get that round. So now round 19 is just guaranteed, right? Cadian is just like elated on the stage. He's just going crazy. So like single-handedly, my man picks them all up, gets them into the grand finals. Like it was Imperial series. Yeah, I mean they played really well. So Heroic saves themselves, gets themselves into the final, and they finally take a win. They finally hoist that trophy after so many seconds at all of these tournaments, so many failed semifinals over the last like year and a half to 2 years. So many second positions, and they
Yeah.
finally take it over the previous major winners, Team Vitality, that just looked indomitable at Paris. They didn't drop a single map at Paris. They looked so good, and then Heroic comes in after like being like it was punch down, drag out against Imperial, and my God, Cadian and the boys finally come through and they win the grand finals for the Blast season. And I was just like through the moon, man. I was so happy for these guys. They were so excited,
Well,
and that was a very exciting final.
and it's kind of crazy because after like I was just looking at it, and although yes they've had a number of seconds and some third fourths recently, they won the fall final for Blast.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
like it was only 6 months ago that they had their last win, but they are such a good team that you kind of do expect them to have picked up one of the between IEM Katowice, the Blast Paris Major, and everything to IEM Rio to take second
Mm-hmm.
in all three of those, and then a couple third, fourth place finishes right after. You're
Mm-hmm.
like, it's impressive that they like, and obviously shows how quality of a team they are that they're up there just in every single tournament.
Hmm. Well, and this was even the rematch from I Am Rio to the final. They've
Yeah,
even lost to Vitality in a final previously, and
yeah,
it didn't like there was no curse in this sense, but here's what I'll say as like an honest enjoyer of esports. This is what I will say about the series. Zywoo for Vitality, he just did not show up for map one. So they were gifted a map. They were truly gifted a map in the first one, but they did it on merit in maps 2 and 3. But you do have to be very honest and say like the superstar, the one who, drops like 25 a game, he did not. And that was a
yeah.
big help for the Heroic Boys on the first map, Vertigo. But yeah, that being said, it was still a really fun series, and I was finally very happy to see Katie hoist that trophy. And I just want to pat myself on the back. Right before the series started, I asked Sarah, I said, "Who's winning this series?" She said, "My heart says Heroic, but I think Vitality's going to win." And I said, "I'm calling it here. I bet Heroic wins today." She says, "All right. I mean, whatever. It's cool to be wrong." And I called it. I called it on the day. My boy Cadian led the boys through. So yeah, that was huge. Really fun final to watch.
Yeah, Zaiwu had a
Um,
brutal first map. He was minus 10,
yeah.
10 kills, 20 deaths, and then he ended up positive at the end of the three maps.
Hmm.
He was 52 and 50, which is
What was
just
crazy
wild.
what was crazy was like he even had a bunch of opportunities too. It was just like whiff after whiff after whiff. There was even this one really nice jump peak that Cadian got onto him like really early in Vertigo. Not saying that like tilted him or whatever, but from a viewer's perspective, it really set the tone for that matchup right there because those are the two sniper rifle players.
Right.
And when you start to eke out in that head to head of those opening duels, you really start to think like, holy shit, one of these guys just isn't here. I think it was like round 5 or 6. Katie gets a sick jump peak, and it's just like, oh god, like you think that's just Zywoo's all day, because Katie even has to like readjust up. Oh, dude, it was wild. It was a really fun series, but yeah, so
Nice.
that's it for our, kind of sprinkling of extra esports here. Like I said, we've got some Valorant a little in the future, so keep your eyes peeled for that. But other than that, I'm ready for your flavor of the week, sir.
Sounds good. So for my flavor of the week, it's just got to be all the wedding food. They had some phenomenal hors d'oeuvre stations. They had a bacon bar. Just anything that I could think of for an hors d'oeuvre they had, and it was delicious. And then my dinner was a nice chunk. It was a lamb shank, so it was a big piece of lamb right at the end of the bone. And I'm
That's
not
sick.
gonna name names, but there were multiple people trying to chip in money to get me to eat it like a caveman, and I said I'm not going to do that at my friend's wedding. That is so nice, and like I'm not gonna have them scrolling through their pictures they get back from the photographer and just have one of me absolutely wolfing down my lamb that I had for dinner. So you know who you are, people, but you're not gonna get me that easy. Um, for my music this week, it actually also is from the wedding. They had a 9-piece band who just like killed it, like great energy all night. With bands, it's like I feel like tough because like you, you don't have like they're mixing so many genres that it might just not be their forte, like one of the different like styles of music, but they were
Hmm.
able to like incorporate their own style into all the songs they play. It blended super well from song to song. So they really crushed it. And for my visual medium this week, there's a new season of the sketch comedy show, I Think You Should Leave, that Colleen and I have been going through. It is going to make you physically uncomfortable with like secondhand cringe, but it cracks me up. There's always a lot of good memes from it, and kind of inside jokes there. The idea of it is basically to take awkward situations that you come across in life, and like they take that and just run with it to like the furthest possible, like, well, then what happens, and then what happens, and just like keep going and going and going with it.
Gotcha.
Till it kind of runs it into the ground, but like in a funny way.
Okay.
It's not like beating a dead horse. They do like just continue to like build on it. But it's a very entertaining show. Tim Robinson is the creator, so I would definitely recommend it if you are okay with cringing for a little bit.
Nice. Cringe. Secondhand cringe is a fun one.
Yeah, so I'm a fan of that one. But Justin,
Nice.
what's your flavor of the week for this week?
Give it to you quick here. So my visual medium is more of a cornucopia of things rather than something specific. So as you all might know, Netflix is changing the policy where you can only have like one whatever. You get it. So with that, some of the shows that we get to watch may be going away, so we're trying to finish up some shows that we're into. With the one that Sarah enjoys is called The Good Witch. It's just this like very wholesome, family oriented, just like everything is okay at the end of everything type of show. So we're trying to finish that up, only a couple more episodes. And then The Legend of Korra, we just have season 4 left. So yeah, trying to basically just like knock this stuff off the list before we're just like we never finished it and we need to know now. We don't want to run into that feeling. My food here for the week. It's not often we do like quick takeout stuff, but we've had the opportunity, I should say, to hit Wawa for lunch a couple times here recently, and I just like, bro, there's like a turkey hoagie that I put together from there, and it's out of this world. There's just something else about like you get to customize it. It feels so fresh. They say I love you when they give it to you, and there's just something about that Wawa feel that I really
kiss
like.
you on the forehead and pat you on
I
the butt
really
and send you
enjoy.
on the way.
Yep, that's my favorite part actually, is the pat on the butt when they send you out the door. And then my music here for the week. This was kind of inspired by Colleen, but me and Sarah got to talking about like, what do we actually look for when we're putting on music? Like, what are we doing when we're putting on music? And just like getting into that conversation, which was kind of interesting. And to boil it down, Sarah likes to sing along to her music, so something that she could like either pick up the words very easily, or just like something that she knows really well that she can sing along to. And then I describe my taste, which I'm very lyric driven. I don't care about any of the instrumentation. I just want to know and understand what's being said. And so less about the music. My bad. What were you gonna say?
No. I would say mine's kind of like the third option there, which is I choose it based on vibes.
Yep. Vibes, what season it is, how you're feeling. Oh yeah, no. There's all sorts of goals to accomplish when putting on music, and we brought you up in it too. I was like, yeah, Aaron, like he's like the playlist guy. So yeah, all sorts of different ways to go about it. So that's just kind of my music here for the week. It was that conversation about what we enjoy.
Nice. That's cool. It's fun to think about because I hadn't really thought about it that much. I saw a TikTok recently that kind of talked about that too, about a girl and her husband, I guess, and she was like listening for lyrics and whatnot, and like he doesn't listen for that at all. He's just like something that he can bop along to, and like not even concerned with learning the words. Like, yeah, you pick up some here and there, and that's like kind of how I am. So it's funny that that I had a similar thought this past week from a TikTok that I saw, kind of brought that up in my head. But
It's out in the zeitgeist.
yeah, it's
The time ghost.
whatever it is, parallel thoughts. But that does bring us, of course, to the end of this week's episode with the flavor of the week. So as always, we really appreciate anyone taking the time to listen, hang out with us, hear us jibber jabber. But we have a blast putting this out, and we're looking forward for this upcoming weekend and the Canadian Grand Prix race companion that we'll have. So should be some good content coming to you live on the YouTube or shortly after being live on the YouTube. But yeah, thanks for taking the time to spend with us.
Tell your friends. New episodes every Thursday. You can find us video on YouTube, audio on Spotify. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for listening. This is another episode of the Tall and Short of a Podcast. Peace out, everyone.
See ya.